here we are for another nice, lovely episode of Let's Go Fresco. Fresco fans, please tell me where you're watching from. Thanks for being here. What a busy few weeks I have had. It was off to Max and prior to that, Lightbox, amazing event for illustrators. And then up to the New York Society of Illustrators, where I got to have a wonderful dinner and honor the new inductees into the Hall of Fame for illustration. Had the great privilege of meeting Floyd Norman, one of the living Disney legends who worked directly with Walt Disney. Had a chance to tell him how much his work and the work of his colleagues meant to me, and literally billions of children growing up over the last 50, 60 years. And what a thing that was. So I'm just a little fried, to be honest, but I'm here to talk about Fresco with you all. So welcome. And today we're going to talk about smudging and blending. You know, there's really not much difference between smudging and blending, but people use these words interchangeably. And I wanted to show you in Fresco several ways that you could blend colors together, okay? So we'll just cover some of those and maybe do a little bit of drawing together. And of course, if you have questions, you can ask them right here, right now, if you're watching on Behance. That's be.net, as in to be or not to be, be.net/Adobe Live, or be.net/live, or behance.net/live. And that's where you'll find me right now. If you're watching over on YouTube or Twitter, thank you for watching. However, I'm following the chat only on Behance, so if you have some questions for me, you can throw them up there. All of these shows are archived, so you can watch them back anytime you want on YouTube. Isn't that great? You can also watch them back over here on Behance. So you just search for the show title, Let's Go Fresco, and the topic, which would in this case be blending, smudging. There you go. Am I in the Hall of Fame, Sean? Haha, I am not, but certainly something to aim for. Or maybe someday if they have like a sort of a technology award or something for the guy who made all the brushes. All right, so it is time. Let's jump over to my iPad here and let's take a look at Fresco. I've got a new document open here, and I'm just going to show you a category of brushes to start things off with that will allow you to do a lot of smudging and blending right out of the gate. No special tools required. And these are the mixer brushes. Now, some of you who use Photoshop might be aware of what mixer brushes are. Mixer brushes are a category of brush that allows you to blend on your canvas. So let's go into our pixel brushes here. And you'll find right here this category, mixer brushes. And look at that. We've got about 12 for you to play with here. Remember, you can import your Photoshop mixer brushes as well. So if there are brushes that you like to use, for example, there are a lot of them in the Real Oils category of the Mega Pack. That's just one example of where you'll find a lot of mixer brushes. If you like those brushes, you can import them by saving them out as an ABR file. I recommend selecting the mixer brushes you like specifically and saving them as a separate ABR file, rather than trying to bring in the entire Mega Pack, which has, I want to say like 450 brushes or something crazy like that. Select the ones you want, save them as an ABR file. In your Brushes panel in Photoshop, go and export the selected brushes, save them as a file, save them maybe to Dropbox, save them to Creative Cloud with your files, save them wherever you like. And here where it says Add Brushes, you would import from files, okay? That's how you do it. All right, now for those of you who do want the entire Mega Pack loaded into Fresco, it's a lot, but you can go to Discover New Brushes, and here you'll find all the seasonal updates, along with all the classic sets like the Mega Pack, right? The gouache brushes here, spatter, etc., watercolors, and everything else that I made over the years for you to enjoy and play with. All right, so that's another option as well. If you were to do it this way, if you simply tap on Add, what will happen is, see this, it says Add here. if you tap on add for any of these brush sets, they will be added instantly to Fresco in the library's category of brushes. If I open my brushes again and go back to the main menu, you'll see that we have all these different categories here, okay? These are the default included brushes in Fresco, about 100 of them or so. But then you come down to this section here, library brushes. And here you'll find all the many libraries that you can load. And these travel with you wherever you go, so that if you were to sign into a friend's iPad with your Adobe ID, your library brushes would just instantly show up and you'd have all your favorite brushes there, which is pretty cool. But there you go. All right, so back to our mixer brushes here. Let's take a look at how mixer brushes work. We'll start with something like the brushy mixer right here. This is the third brush down, this guy right here. Better to use some bright colors so we can see what we're doing rather than use black. So I'll select an orange and I'll make my brush a little bit bigger. Here we go. All right, now I'll paint a few strokes on the canvas. Nice little canvas texture there. We'll zoom in a bit. So far, nothing special is happening. This is because we're only painting with the one color at the moment. But here's where it gets interesting. If I select another color, okay, and we'll grab this nice yellow here, and I paint off to the side, nothing happens. But as I paint over the orangey red color, see that? We're getting some nice mixing happening. So for those of you who like to emulate oils or acrylics, paints that mix, mixer brushes are a great way to do this really, really fast. You just select any color, start painting, and select another color. And when you paint into it, you're going to get these nice blends. But you may be wondering what causes the controls or how do you control, the mixing properties here? Because you don't always want things to mix exactly the same way all the time. Don't worry, very easy to do this. For any brush that you have in Fresco, whether it's a pixel brush or a live watercolor or oil brush or a vector brush, you have brush settings right here. I'm just reading some comments here for just a moment. People just saying hello and happy full moon and all these nice things. That's great. Hey everybody, hello, hello. Oh, lots of new people have joined in. Hi, hi, hi. Quickly say some names: Linda and Sean and Jen and Becca and Evie and SFXL and Bruce. Nice to see you. Steve, hi, hi, hi. David. Hope I didn't miss anybody there. Okay, so look at this, brush settings. Now, if you select mixer brushes, you're going to see this category added to your options right here, mixing. So when we tap on mixing, this is where you get 3 sliders that you can play with that will control how the paint mixes on the surface. Okay, let's take a look at them. So first, wetness, okay? Wetness is going to basically make it so that you're going to get faster mixing. I'm not sure how else to say it. The paint is going to be wetter, so the mixing will happen rapidly. If I reduce the wetness, okay, of the paint, here we go, and then mix, it's going to happen more slowly. Put some yellow down, grab some yellow, some blue, I mean. Grab some yellow. The yellow is really kind of dominating here. Not totally, but a little bit of blue is getting picked up, but barely, okay? But if I increase that wetness all the way up to 100, look at that. Lots of blending. All right, so that's one thing to consider, the wetness of the paint. Next is the load of the paint. What this means is how much paint are you putting on your brush? So if you've used our oils, our live oils in Fresco, then you know that you can put a lot of paint on your brush so that when you touch the canvas, a lot of it's going to be deposited very rapidly. But if you reduce that flow, we call it flow, but it's actually like the load of the paint with the oils. If you reduce that, you're going to have less paint coming out at once. Okay, see that? It even just kind of runs out after a while. All right. Now if I grab another color though, because it's still wet, I'm still going to get some blending. All right, there you go. Back to the mixing. So we have a full load of paint. Brush is really super saturated, full of paint. Now mixing, you'll notice right now it's set to 0, and you think, well then why is it mixing at all? Well, this is one of the interesting properties of mixer brushes. If the paint is really, really, really wet, regardless of whether or not you set a value for mixing, okay, you're going to have mixing occur, okay, because these are just the brushes that you're dealing with. But here's an interesting thing about this. What this really controls, I want you to think about mixing as a sort of percentages game for what's on the canvas already, like the colors that are sitting on your canvas, versus the colors that are in your brush hovering over the canvas about to be applied. So if I have, okay, blue on the canvas, and in my brush, okay, I have yellow. So now my brush is loaded with yellow. If mixing is set to a high value, like 100%, okay, then what winds up happening is the color that's on the canvas will more quickly be absorbed into the color mix. It will, in effect, dominate the color mixing more rapidly. So that means blue is going to really make its way into the colors that I paint on the canvas once I touch an area with that blue, okay? And the yellow will sort of start to fall away and be controlled more by the blues. You see as I pull away how much blue is coming with me there. As I pull through here, see that? By the time I get to here, it's all blue, okay? So let's do this again. I'm gonna start painting yellow up here. I'm gonna pull through all the way down to the bottom. And you see that? By the time I get here, it's already blue. Now, let's go ahead and let's reduce the mixing value, okay? We'll put it like maybe 30%, okay? I want you to keep in mind how things look here, so I'm gonna leave this mark on the canvas right here. I'm gonna do the same thing as before, pull through here. And do you see how I've got some yellow that's sticking with me a lot longer there, okay, in the mix? Well, why is that? Because I have a lower mixing value, okay? Now, let's go back again to our brush, and now let's take our mixing value down to 0 as it once was, right? And I'm going to pull through again, and look at that. I'm able to retain some yellow all the way through the stroke and all the way through that patch of blue paint. So this is the way you can really control the effects that you have with the mixing values, the wetness values, okay, and the load of the paint on the brush. So we give you some really powerful and specific ways to get exactly the kinds of effects you want at any given moment while you're painting. And this is a nice thing because there are times when you're going to want to have like a dry paint kind of a look. And if we do that, put the mixing down to 0, put the wetness down to 0. Okay, look at that. Well, no mixing occurs. Okay, but maybe I take the wetness value and just bring it up to like 15%. Okay, 16%. That way I'm able to pick up some of that blue as I paint, okay, but it's subtle, yeah? And I can scrub over it a few times and just go straight to yellow, like that. So again, lots and lots of options for you there. Those are mixer brushes. And mixer brushes, just like any other pixel brushes, I'm glad to say, can take advantage of multicolor swatches in Fresco, which means you can paint with multiple colors on your brush simultaneously, which is very cool. So let's take a look at that. Here in this area, for example, where I've got a bunch of stuff going on, if I hold down my touch modifier, this guy right here, if I just hold it down and then with another finger touch anywhere on the canvas, I can select all these colors at once. And you'll now see here where my color swatch is, right there, see that? How it has multiple colors on it. So when I next paint with that brush, this is what I get. Look how cool that is. So those of you who have not used multicolor swatches, my goodness, you're missing out, because this is just a really amazing thing to be able to paint with multiple colors on your brush at any given time. And another amazing thing about multicolor swatches, and I've demonstrated this many times, but it's always worth repeating because there's so few people who know about this, is you are not limited to the colors that you have on the brush at that moment forever. If you like the configuration, okay, of the arrangement of those colors, the darks to lights, the hues, etc., and like how much of each of them is actually on the total brush stamp, what you can do is go ahead and open up your color menu here, and you'll find this HSB sliders right here. Just open that up, and here you can simultaneously change the hue, saturation, and brightness of all the colors that are loaded on your brush at that time. So look, I slide over this way, changing all those colors simultaneously, and now I have this. Okay, same arrangement, right? But those relationships have all been shifted. Okay, so that is a pretty amazing feature. And once that color swatch is selected, it's sticky, so that if I go to a different mixer brush now, for example, I want to use perhaps the rake mixer right here, those colors are all still going to be on that brush. All right, rake mixer, by the way, wow, that's a really fun one. You can see what that does, and with heavier pressure you're going to get more paint deposited on the canvas, right? And lighter pressure, smaller mark, and also less intense. Okay, but imagine taking a brush like this, for example, and loading it with multiple colors. Okay, let's go ahead and try a different arrangement here, like this. That's nice. Loading it with multiple colors, and then going ahead and doing something like painting in some hair for a character, right? Isn't that fun? Just be able to do that all in one pass. And then I could just maybe grab a detail mixer and make it smaller. And it's still got multiple colors on it, but I can do my line art like this. That is fun. So to be able to do these kinds of things so quickly and with such interesting colors and mixing and all these beautiful things is just a really special thing, and it's just so easy here to change those arrangements, right? Don't forget, you always have your recent brushes right here, so instead of tracking down everything you've used, just go to recent and go right back to that rake mixer and throw in different colors here. Notice how much mixing is happening, a lot. Why is that? Let's go look. Oh look, this is why. The paint is very wet, we'll reduce that. And the mixing is very high, we can reduce that too. And now it's going to be a little bit more subtle right there. Can even take it all the way down to 0. And get more of that orange showing up like that now. These are fun. Look at this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to hold down my touch modifier, and I'm going to select this area right here. And now I have a brand new swatch to paint with. See that? And I'm going to take my mixing down to 0 for a moment and just paint on top like this. It's kind of addictive. Really fun. All right, so you get the idea, right? There's one other thing we didn't look at with mixing brushes, all right? And that is, when you have your mixer brush selected, you have the option to reload the color right here, okay? if you choose not to reload the color, what will happen is whatever mix you've wound up with on the brush as it's been pulled through all the other colors, which, as you know, if you were using traditional media, would make the brush quote unquote dirty, right? It's going to have colors from the paint that are on the canvas and that have blended with everything that was on the brush, all jumbled up and mixed into the bristles. Well, you can do that here if you want. And you can choose to have reload color turned on or off. Now, if it's turned off, okay, let me just go ahead and increase the wetness here. So we're going to get some nice mixing happening here. I want to make sure we get some mixing. So if I put some color down like this, and then we go ahead and we change the colors to this. So here's our new set of colors, okay? Look at my settings under mixing here. Reload color is turned on. So if I were to paint through the blue here, okay, and come out the other side, the next time I paint, I have a clean brush. It's got the same colors as before, okay? But look, let's go ahead and turn that off. We go to mixing, reload color is now turned off. So I'm gonna paint through here like this. Now when I next make a mark, let me see if I can get some blue on there. Sorry, I think I have to make the brush a lot wetter for that to work. Whoop, there we go. We'll increase the mixing there. There. Ah, okay. Right here at the beginning, you can see some blue. And so the way it shows up is at the beginning of the stroke, but it seems to me like what happens is the brush basically cleans itself as you continue painting. That's very interesting. And that is actually kind of how it works in Photoshop, so that makes sense. I guess we're being consistent there, I like that. So I pick up some blue. The next time I make a stroke, there's a bit of blue in it. So the way I can see this being useful is if you're doing sort of like a painting where you want to have the appearance that every time you picked up your brush and painted, you didn't actually fully clean your brush. And let's try that with something chunkier. We'll go to our mixer brushes, and we'll use this blocky mixer right here. And we'll just use a solid color. Here we go. And we'll go to our mixing and turn up the values, and then grab our yellow, paint inside. So I'm using yellow, but the next time I make a stroke, this is what it looks like, right? It's retaining the red in the brush. But if I were to continue painting with it along a distance, it would probably start to clean itself and eventually wind up being totally yellow again. So let's see. Pick up the red. I start painting again. Whoops. Oh, there it is. Oh, I see. Okay. So here's the secret. Okay, you have to stay inside of a colored area that isn't the same color as what's on your brush when you lift the stylus. When you next put it down, you're going to then be applying some of that color onto the canvas. So every time I pulled the brush out from the color pool of what was on the canvas, that's when the effect did not work. So here, check it out. Whoops. Let's go ahead and do this. I'll put some yellow down here, and this time I'll grab a sort of a purplish color like this. And if I paint in like this and then pull out, the next time I paint, the brush is clean. But if I paint and stay in the yellow, the next time I paint, I get some of the yellow in that brush stroke. There we go, we solved it. Very interesting. So there you have it. That's pretty much everything you can do with mixer brushes. Remember that just like our oils or any other pixel brushes, mixer brushes will pick up color from anything that's on the canvas. It's not as if I paint with a regular pixel brush or regular Photoshop category brush, the mixer brush will not be able to pull color from that area. And this is the same as the oils, okay? So for example, let's go into our painting category. And let's say that with the chunky brush, okay, I put some color down. And I'm painting like this. No mixing is going to happen here. If I grab another color and paint, well, that's just the color that I get, all right? But if I wanted to mix something in here, what I could do is go ahead and grab one of the mixer brushes, okay? And we'll just grab that blocky mixer again. And now, if I grab a different color, notice that the mixer brush is going to pick up that orange and paint with it. See that? So, the mixer brushes can pick up color from anywhere, no matter what brush was used. That includes watercolors, it includes oils, doesn't matter, okay? And just as a demonstration, with the oils, the watercolors, I'll put some color down with a watercolor brush, right? Now, once that's on the canvas, even though Fresco knows that's wet paint, we do keep track of that, right? Because if I were to then use another color, right, we're still going to be able to do a nice watercolor blends and all that. But if I were to go then to a mixer brush, okay, so this time we'll use the sandy mixer, for example. And I'll use a different color. Painting into the yellow here, see that? It's going to pick up some of that yellow. So even though that was watercolor sitting on the canvas, right? Taking this other pixel brush, that's a regular Photoshop brush, and painting red into the yellow is still going to pick up that color. The reason I mention these kinds of things is I want everybody to know that there are so many very strange and really cool natural media effects you can achieve by combining these different categories of brushes. One of the interesting things about working in a digital environment is that we, the designers of the app, can decide what mixes with what. There are no real rules. Now in the physical world, if you're using watercolors, oils, etc., certain mediums don't exactly play nicely together or don't yield predictable results, etc. That's not a factor when you're just dealing with pixels. And this is an example of that. So what would be a nice thing for you to do is to challenge yourself to come up with interesting ways to combine some of these mediums you wouldn't normally use in the physical world. For example, watercolors and oils. If you can use both in a piece in a way that really yields some very interesting results, and you have the infinite power of undo and working with layers and things like that, it'd be really cool to see what you can come up with. So that's a good thing to keep in mind. All right, pause here for any questions. Rakes look cool. Yes, they're fun. Evie, if you're looking for ways to use multicolor swatches effectively, I think I have a good tip for you. Can you flip the color swatch or rotate it? No, you can't do that, but that would be very nice, and I think we should. It's a good idea. But I've got a tip for you there. Let me just read another question. Hi Bikram, thanks for being here. From Bangladesh, cool. Yes, lots of options. All right, so here we go. Let me give you a tip. If you're looking for a practical way in your work to use the multicolor swatches, one of the things I like to show is this more subtle way of using them, where, here, I'll use this. I like to put some color down, and then with a brush like, for example, in the painting category, the Blair brush, go ahead and make a slightly darker version of that color. Okay. And, oops, I gotta select the, not Blair, sorry, block stain, my mistake, excuse me. Go ahead and paint over it. And notice how I'm gonna have some areas that stay open like this, right? Because of the texture and things like that. Do that again so you can see. And this time I'll paint very, very lightly, and leave more areas that are kind of open. I'll do it again. And this is really subtle, okay? You're gonna have just these little breaks everywhere. Then I could go slightly lighter, like this, and put some color down, like this. And basically what I wind up with is these nice areas where I get a few darks, a few lights, all kinds of things, right? And then, I'll do one more dark pass here. Then what I do is I take my multicolor eyedropper. So let's hold down our touch modifier. And remember, you don't have to use the touch modifier if you don't want to. You can always go to your eyedropper tool. Here's my eyedropper tool. We have two options down here. You have, this is for single color, regular eyedropper, and this is your multicolor right here. So you can use your multicolor eyedropper anywhere you like. All right, same deal. But I like to use my finger. I just kind of move it around, whatever. But look here, see all these nice little variations in here? Okay, so I tap on that. Now, what I find good about this is now, no matter what brush I paint with, okay, I just have subtle variations in the hue, saturation, and value along the stroke. And to me, this is sort of just for a really natural way to paint with color and using any brush. This is I keep doing this, sorry, today I keep using my lasso tool to paint. This is just a really cool way to work, because no matter what shape I paint, you can see evidence of the bristles. See that? Pulling through. If I do it with the canvas brush, for example. See that? It's just showing me every time I paint those variations, and I can see each stroke kind of layering on top of the next, right? So that to me is an interesting way to use multicolor swatches. Rather than using a totally flat color, you use a color that has subtle changes, right? And this is good at emulating natural media, basically. And you can go as subtle as you like, you know. Something like this, for example, is there's some very subtle changes in there, very subtle changes. So that makes this effect even less powerful, but it's still there, right? And that's a really great thing. You can do it with any of the brushes, you know, chunky brush is a good one. It already has some nice color dynamics built in and some other cool things, but being able to use it with a multicolor swatch like this is just going to make these brush strokes look really natural, right? See what I mean? Look at all that nice variation I'm getting in there. Then you come into your hue and saturation sliders to adjust your colors rather than using your color wheel. Okay, so you just keep those open and do what you want, right? Just always have these ready to go, and you can paint with the multicolor swatches like this. Okay, so that's an interesting way to use them. I think it's a more subtle application of it, but pretty cool effects, and I think people dig it. And again, one of those things, I don't see a lot of people doing it, or maybe not talking about it, but if more people try it, they'd probably be pretty excited about the possibilities there. Okay, when you're using multicolor swatches, by the way, you'll notice that they get saved here with all your recent colors. Okay, we are going to be doubling or even tripling the number of multicolor swatches we save in our recents. Normally we save all of the flat colors that you use in a document. There's really no limit. But multicolor swatches, I believe, are currently limited to something like 12 or something like that. So I'm hoping to get that up to 36 with the team ASAP, so that you have a really good range of colors you can switch back and forth between. And as a reminder, if you're looking for ideas for multicolor swatches, you're kind of stuck and just want to do some fun things with some brushes that paint with weird shapes and patterns and colors, if you tap on your colors down here, if you tap on all right here, Fresco colors, this category will give you, look at this, a whole bunch of multicolor swatches to try. Everyone likes this Cheese Whiz brush, for example. And they're fun to use with with a brush, for example, like the hard round brush. So I'll make that larger. See? That's pretty fun. You're just basically taking the stamp, and with a hard round brush, there's no jitter or any scatter or anything funny like that. So you can really understand like what that multicolor swatch tip does. But also, there is a swatch in there already ready to go. It's the second one right here. And that's one of those swatches that is built to do what I was just demonstrating a moment ago, which is to paint with subtle effects. I'll go to my recents here and select the canvas brush. You'll see it's a nice subtle kind of a thing there. Okay? Or with the chunky brush, for example. Really nice effect there. Okay? So try that one. You don't even have to make your own. That one's sort of a built-in, ready to go. Yeah, Cheese Whiz, says Steve. Yeah. Okay, good. I'm glad people that didn't know about that are now knowing this. Is the science behind the live oil brushes based on this? Annika asks. No, it's very different. But it is the next thing I'm going to talk about because we're talking about blending and smudging. In the oils category, you have brushes that do what the mixer brushes do, which is pick up color that's on the canvas and blend with it, more or less of it, depending on a different slider we use, which is very simplified. It's just a mixing slider, a single mixing slider. If I use the round brush, for example, right here, and paint with it, and then go ahead and use a different color, see how it mixes, okay? That's all due to this slider right here, paint mix. Okay, it's very low right now. Now, just as before, as I showed you with mixer brushes, if I increase the mixing, for example, okay, it's going to pick up more of that blue more quickly, like so. And just like with our mixer brushes, in your brush settings, you do have that option right here to reload the color. The difference with oils is that when you paint with it, it's going to keep whatever's on the brush, like real oil paints. And so if that's something you're interested in doing in your work, you can do so. As for the thickness of the paint, that's controlled here. And it's kind of two things. It's how much paint's on the brush, but also the thickness of the paint, like how thick and ooey gooey it is. Kind of all of that happens with this one slider, if you will. So right now I have it really kind of cranked up there, so it's big. All right, big and chunky. If I were to slide that down, okay, it's not going to be so thick. See that? And I really have to bear down and dig in to try and cover up an area where there was thick paint before. You can see the height of it still shows through. Let's clear that away for a moment. And let's take a look at, reload the color. Why this is good for people who want to use these multicolor swatches, right? You're using it here with the oils, but it's going to blend and mix, right? But it's still going to have some tiny bit of height, if you will. Tiny bit of height, depth. So it's really subtle, but it's there. So this is one of those things where mixer brushes are great and you can use them to your heart's content, and occasionally what you want to do is start a painting with mixer brushes. When you've got it all worked out, you can come in with the oils and you can do a few touch-ups here and there where you add just a little bit of depth, maybe to the edge of a shape or to a little section, maybe a highlight, maybe like, you know, you have a highlight in some area that you want to just grab some white and crank that thickness all the way up and reduce the paint mix, and then just dump that in there like that. See? So you get that nice little feel of like, ooh, there's some paint sitting up on the surface there. That kind of thing. Okay, and you can sort of blend it. If I turn the mixing back on, it's going to pick up some of those other colors too. That's nice. Look at all these effects you can get here, from thick to thin to everything else. Pretty amazing. So yeah, being able to work with the mixer brushes and the oils together is very interesting. The oils are different also, Annika, in the way that they have a lighting setting so that they create both highlights and shadows within the brush stroke and on the surface of the canvas. Mixer brushes don't do that. And I'll mention too that one of the things we're doing for everybody is we're going to change the lighting for the oils. From day one, the lighting has been fine, but not what I want. I'm very picky about these things, and I've been talking to the engineers about making sure that in a very soon to be released version of Fresco, when we also release thicker oils, we want to make sure that the lighting is going to be coming from the top left. And so this will also have a greater impact on how realistic the oils look. Okay, but there you go. So now the oils, just like the mixers, allow you to do some mixing and blending as well. Now what we haven't talked about yet is the smudge tool, and that's what I want to look at last. This is of course a very powerful tool with lots of settings and lots of possibilities. And while I have some oils here on the canvas, I want to show you first one of the coolest things you can do in Fresco with the smudge tool. And that is you can smudge away oils, even though they're completely different kind of stuff. I mean, they've got thickness to them, they've got light and height, all these things. If you grab a smudge tool, okay, let's for example go into the dry media category. Maybe we'll choose soft chalk, okay? With the smudge tool, you have flow, okay? We call it strength here, but it's basically the weaker the smudge tool is, the less it's going to push the pixels that are on the canvas around or smudge them or blend, okay? And then the higher the value is, the more it will do that. Okay, so look at this. We have oils, and I'm just going to take a smudge tool and smudge them. Now the other cool thing is the smudge tools in Fresco will respect the texture of the brush. When I say brush, I want you to think of smudge tools as brush tools because their settings are similar, right? They have scattering, they have spacing, they have controls for the diameter and the opacity, so to speak, which is really more the strength in this case, tied to the pen pressure. But not only that, every single brush that you import into Fresco or that is already in the app is automatically available to you as a smudge tool. This is amazing. So you have hundreds, if not thousands, of smudge tools at your disposal right away. Whatever the properties are of a brush that you're using, okay, so in the dry media category, the soft chalk, if I look at the brush settings for this, spacing is set to 5, okay, the shape dynamics, I've got a size jitter there, minimum diameter of 50%, etc. If we come to the smudge tool and look at soft chalk, you'll see that I'm able to adjust those and they're sticky. So right out of the gate, normally what would happen if I reset it, okay, you see that? It goes to 5%, shape dynamics 5, 50. Now these are all the same as the original brush itself. But I can keep these tools separate from one another. Okay, so I can increase the spacing a little bit here, like I did before, 7%, etc. And I can control the strength, right? We bumped that up a little higher than 50. And now I'm smudging with that right here with the oils. But the other cool thing about this is that if you are using a smudge tool with oils, you can, with light pressure, just graze the surface, okay? And what you'll be doing is actually adding texture with dimension, with height, and with lighting to the surface. This is very strange. So if I do this here, you should be able to see that there are bumps now on the white paint, right? So you're creating a textural effect on top of the paint. One of my favorite examples of this is I'll use a dark color so you can see this clearly. We'll go ahead and grab a nice sort of rich purplish kind of a color here. I'll make sure I use some really thick paint. Okay, And then I'll even use the chunky brush right here. Chunk, 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 chunk. Really throw some thick paint on there. Okay, there's my thick paint. Now, here's something weird and wild. I'm going to use the smudge tool, all right? And I'm going to change it into a spatter tool right here, spatter, under the FX category. Make it a little smaller. All right, now, I'm spattering and smudging. See that? Okay, it's just picking up the purple and smudging it around. But let me pause for a moment and this time take my strength up to 100. And now, look at what's happening. It's actually digging into the surface. And it's creating divots, and it's also creating little bubbles on top that have dimension to them. Can you see that? See that? So it's like the craters of the moon, if you will. That is a really crazy effect. So this is one of those really neat little special effects you can do only in Fresco. And if I'll add an adjustment layer. So you can, actually I'll do the, increase the brightness and contrast. You can really, hopefully see this really clearly. I'll come in here and smudge some more. See that? You can do this with anything. So why don't I grab a smudge tool like a rake brush? We were talking about the rakes earlier. And I'll grab this big rake, push the strength up to 100. Whoops, I don't want to come from, there we go. And look at that. I was able to sort of carve into the paint with the rake and create those really cool effects. So isn't this crazy? So usually I kind of end with a demo like that because it's so weird, but I like to just kick it off with this to show you something, a special effect that's possible with smudging. Now, obviously the more commonly used smudge effects in people's paintings are not this, although this is really cool. Normally what you do is, of course, you do some painting. So we'll grab our nice canvas brush right here. And we'll be painting along. And we'll have another color. Okay, and normally what we do with smudging is use any kind of other brush. Let's say I could use, for example, the painting, I would just use the same brush, the canvas brush right here. Use it as a smudge tool, put the strength somewhere like around in the 70s perhaps. And then just smudge and blend these together nicely like that. Voila. And that's a really fun, easy way to blend an area. And that's the most typical way people do blend. Okay, so just take a pause here and see. What brush might scrape away paint like a palette knife? Says Peg. Well, there are palette knife brushes in the Mega Pack. And I suppose if you were to use them in Fresco to carve into this, you could make some interesting things happen. I don't think you'd be able to completely remove paint, although I take that back. If you were to select one of the palette knife brushes and use it as an eraser, with light pressure, you'd be able to come over part of the paint and not push all of it away, but with heavy pressure, you'd be able to erase it away, and you'd also be able to carve into it. There are lots of things you could do there. So there are some interesting possibilities for sure. Remember that any brush in Fresco can automatically be made into an eraser, and if it were the palette knife brush, for example, you would just hold down your touch modifier while you're painting with it, or double tap the touch modifier to turn it into an eraser. For example, here we have, let's see, like a wet bristle brush as an example. So I'm painting with the wet bristle brush, okay? And then if I hold down the touch modifier, I can erase with that same brush with all of its properties, right? Or I can double tap and lock it in as an eraser and start erasing. So you see here I'm able even to erase the oils, right? So if it were a paintbrush, right, I would just be painting. If it were a smudge tool, I'd be smudging, right? If I increase the strength to 100, it's gonna smudge it right out. But if I were to use a palette knife and cut into it, it would be a sharper look, obviously. I currently don't have anything loaded that I think would work quite like a palette knife, but hopefully what I've just described to you makes sense, and you could give it a try, because I think you would have some pretty good results right there. So yeah, there you go. Hope that answers your question. RB's here. Hey RB, nice to see you. And Elisandra. Hey, all right, any other questions before we go? I think we've got it pretty well covered here, but your smudge tools are, again, located right here, and you'll see all the same categories and all the same library brushes as what you've already loaded. They're already there, ready to go. Typically used for blending in the manner that I just demonstrated right here. But now you also know that there are these cool, weird special effects you can do with them when you're using thick paint like oils, okay? The last thing I want to end with is just the controls for your smudging. We talked a little bit about it, but just to make sure we're all clear here, we'll go back to the soft chalk here. And when I'm smudging with the soft chalk, like I showed you a moment ago, you can see the texture of the brush. Note that on the first pass, you're going to get a lot of texture. But if I pull and go back and forth and just keep blending over and over again, that texture gets smudged away, and whatever you do becomes smoother and smoother and smoother. So this is a good thing to know about how the smudge tool works, okay? The more you brush over an area, the less of the texture you retain. And the other good thing to know, of course, is the strength, which I showed you. So if you do want less of that texture, okay, and less smudging occurring, you want to use a lesser value for the strength. This allows you to do a lot of really subtle things, subtle blends and things like that. And then the other thing is here, spacing. Note that if the spacing is somewhere between like 4 and 8% or something like that, you're usually going to get more texture and faster smudging. If you reduce the spacing to say 0, okay, you're going to have smudging that happens with a little less texture. Let me use a different brush to really demonstrate this clearly. Go to painting, and we'll use the canvas brush, okay? All right, so let's open this up. Notice that the smudge spacing is set to 13. I'm going to put it down to 0. Then we just come over here and smudge. What you're going to get is this kind of pulling effect. All right, and depending on how much pressure you use, if I use a lot of pressure, okay, like this, I should be able to pull a little farther. If I use light pressure and pull, it's not going to go very far. But if I increase the spacing, let's do that right here. Let's do 10%. Oops, something like that. 10's fine, 9's fine, whatever. And do the same thing. You can see evidence of the spacing in the stroke right there. Okay, now this can be good for subtle effects where what you want to do is you want to go back and forth a few times. So if I do 1, 2, 3 and back and forth a few times, I'm able to get this kind of effect. All right, where it's just kind of softening that edge over here, and do the same back and forth and back and forth. But if I try and do that with my spacing set to 0, what it really winds up doing is pushing things back and forth. See what I mean? It pushes it back and forth, and you don't actually get the blending. So this is the two different ways that you can use it depending on how you set the spacing. So it is definitely worth looking at spacing and playing with spacing when you do use smudge tools for different effects. And if it is that softer blend you're looking for, then go ahead and increase the spacing. and you're going to have some really good results. I can do this, I can do this, I can go back and forth and get some nice soft edges like that. Final thing, put some watercolor down, like so. So pretty. And then look at this. Smudge the watercolor. Remember what I said earlier? Pixels are pixels to Fresco. Fresco doesn't care. So again, the ability to be able to paint watercolors into oils. Okay? Crazy. Look at that. Paint watercolors into oils. Get really cool effects like that. Grab a smudge tool. Smudge some of it together. Okay? Grab a smudge tool like the big rake, set it up to 100, pull through all that mess, and do that. Can't do it anywhere else, folks. Thanks for hanging out. Take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and be kind. I'll see you next time. Ciao for now.